Hi, my name is Kaiden, and I love being a boy. This was me when I was little. I had long hair for a long time, but that never stopped me from being a boy. The teachers at my preschool tried to force me to wear a skirt as part of our school uniform, which was frankly upsetting and very confusing, but that never stopped me from being a boy. It took me a few years to realize I felt just a little different. I'd thought I was a boy until people were rude enough to tell me otherwise. I couldn't really figure out what I was. I felt like a boy, but people didn't seem to agree. The girls told me I was a tomboy, among other things. I liked hanging out with the boys, and it was nice, but there was always a very distinct difference between us. It was a very confusing time for me growing up. I had a really hard time figuring out what I was supposed to be, which is hard considering I was still a little kid. I didn't know anything. So what did I do in the face of confusion? I pushed away femininity. I distinctly remember a time when I legitimately forgot the word for vagina. Of course, a few years later, when the dreaded puberty hit, everything became much more confusing. When I started becoming curvy and having a figure and boobs, I was pissed. My period was always a really confusing thing for me. My mom told me I should be happy that I finally became a woman. She frequently told me the story about how when her first period came, she was so happy she started crying. I remember hearing that and being like, okay, that sounds fake, but I guess. And when mine came, it was just underwhelming. In fact, I hated it. It made me feel wrong. But at this point, I was realizing that I guess I'm a girl. I looked like a girl, my body gave me girl things, ergo, I'm a girl. And apparently I always have been. Fucked up concept, but I went with it. And so, all the way through middle school and high school, I believed that I was a girl. I dressed a little more girly, aka skinny jeans instead of cargo pants. Sometimes I wore girl shirts, aka the ones that have dumb sleeves. But that was about as far as I'd go. I still tried really hard to hide my figure with sweatshirts. Ask any of my friends from childhood and they'll tell you I wore the same hoodie every single day for high school. Every day. I mean it. I wanted so badly to fit in, but something just felt so wrong about putting all of my body out there for the world to see. It felt uncomfortable and vulnerable. I had this really big jealousy complex, and it took me until now to realize what exactly I was jealous of. I was jealous of girls because they looked great, but were also so confident with the bodies they had. I was jealous of boys because I wanted to look like them, and no amount of baggy clothing would get me there. No matter how badly I wanted it, it was never possible. And so it went like this, from my birth right until the end of high school, when something finally clicked for me. I met a bunch of transgender people on the internet, and I thought, hey, maybe I should look at those feelings that I've always had, but pushed down into a hole in my mind, and locked it 3 times and threw the key in the ocean, and anyway, I finally realized that something that I'd always wanted, to be a boy, was possible. Of course, it wasn't exactly a beautiful moment of clarity. It scared me. I didn't want to stay where I was because I was wildly uncomfortable with myself, but I also knew that if I chose the path that I really wanted, there would be years and years of work ahead of me. I stayed in this limbo for a while, knowing I was trans, but dead terrified by being vulnerable enough to admit this to others. But one day I decided I couldn't keep lying to myself and everyone else. So I cut my hair, I changed my name, I started hormones. So that was basically how I realized I was trans. But I was really curious, what about the people who had known me for years? Were they surprised when I came out as trans to them? Yes and no. I sort of was not surprised by the time you told me. You'd been leading up to it, and when you finally did say it, it wasn't really a surprise. By the time you came out, it was obvious that something was up. Originally, I just figured you were gay, so the trans unveiling was a little surprising. Nope, not really. Of course I was surprised. However, not really, because you always embodied an androgynous way of being. You dressed unisex in a natural way. Yes, I was surprised, but that was not really part of my reaction. I was so happy for you, and it did make sense. I was a tiny bit, but in retrospect, I guess not really. For the first, 3.5 minutes, yeah, a little, but then no, not really. I don't think I was either surprised or not surprised, and I guess it made sense. I never really associated a gender with you other than everyone giving you she, her pronouns. I think at first I was surprised just because I always thought or saw you being really true to yourself and loving who you were. I always saw you being confident, and I always admired that about you. Then when you came out, I was confused because that meant you probably weren't very comfortable all the time in your body at school. So what I've concluded from all these responses is that even though it took me years to finally accept this within myself, a good chunk of the people who have known me for a long time were not really surprised. Even after the initial shock, they all realized it was true, and that it was who I really was. And with this information, I'm guessing that based on my own experiences, if I'd heard of trans people much earlier in life, I would have came out much earlier too. Some quick research for y'all. In 2011 and 2014, the Williams Institute did a study to find out how many trans people are in the US. The first number they came up with was 700,000, but the second number was 1.4 million. That's huge. My own personal takeaway from this is that the world becomes more educated on trans issues, and then more people begin to see it within themselves. And so I've made it my purpose in life to be as out and visible as possible. I want people to see that I'm trans and existing. If I can help even one trans kid not go through what I went through, it'll mean everything I did was worth it.